colleagues, researchers, and students from all over the world. I see guests from Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Thailand, from the United States, I believe,
Yes.
And from Europe. A very warm welcome to today's online talk hosted by the University of Graz. It is truly a pleasure to me to see many familiar faces again. Some of you I had the privilege of meeting in person at your respective universities. Thank you for joining us once more in this virtual setting. Today we are honored to welcome Dr. Marcin Damek from Nanjing University. Marcin is a historian whose work focuses on modern Chinese history, missionary studies, and Hakka studies. He recently completed his PhD at Nanjing University with a thesis on the relations between the Basel mission and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, a topic that sits at the very heart of how a marginalized label became a proud, self-conscious ethnic identity. As a linguist, I have long been fascinated by the question of when and how the word Hakka first appears as a group name and how this identity was actively shaped. Our earlier conversations on this subject have been extremely stimulating. I see Marcin's talk today as a valuable historical complement to that linguistic and anthropological inquiry to what we call Hakkaology. So the title of this presentation is From Guest People and Newcomers to Proud Hakkas, How the Basel Mission and Taiping Heavenly Kingdom Forged Modern Hakka Identity and Language. I'm very much looking forward to his insights and to the discussions that will follow afterwards. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to hand over to you, to Mr. Marcin Damek. The floor is yours, Marcin.
Thank you very much, Professor Vollmann, for this comprehensive introduction. And I'm very happy and honored to be invited by you and University of Graz to deliver this speech, this lecture to all of you. And let me share my screen first and the presentation. Okay. Can everybody see the screen? Okay. So, as it was already stated, that today's presentation title is From Guest People to and Newcomers to Proud Hakkas, How Basel Mission and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom Forge Modern Hakka Identity and Language. First, I would like to provide an outline for the presentation for everyone. So first, I would like to state the research basis behind this presentation. That includes my PhD thesis, upcoming articles, and other materials. Then I will move to inspiration behind the presentation. And then I swiftly will make an introduction to two big entities that play a huge important role in this lecture or this talk, the Basel Mission and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Afterwards, I will go deeper into the Basel-Taiping relations in relation to Hakka identity and language. Following, I will deliver my conclusion. And for this presentation, I will present two initial arguments. The one is that how we understand the Hakka identity now differs from how the Basel missionaries and how originally the people involved in the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom were involved. And initial argument number two was that the connections between the Basel mission and Taiping Heavenly Kingdom proved instrumental in constructing the Hakka identity and to some extent language. So for the basis of the presentation, I would like to note that even during my PhD pursuit, I was couple of my friends from academia and outside suggested that I should also consider the Hakka dimension when discussing the relations between the Basel mission and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. And then I slowly started to explore this in some newer research papers that included the one that I presented at Kudat Sabah during the seminar about the identity of the Hakka Christians there. So you see the screenshot of my upcoming paper that Pastor Chong Tet Loy from Basel Christian Church in Malaysia is going to publish, and considers the Basel mission Taiping Heavenly Kingdom and formation of the Hakka identity. But I didn't want to just end here with this, just retelling the research findings of the thesis and this particular paper. I wanted to go a little one step further and start to slowly consider other sources that also touch upon the Basel and Taiping relations and Hakka identity. And since I realized that this is a mixed audience, that Professor Vollmann, his students are mostly concerned more with linguistics. Some of you are Hakkas themselves, or they're Hakka experts. So this presentation by large would be both broad, but also very specific. So I hope that everybody could have some takeaways for themselves. So if you're new to the studies, don't worry, there will be some basic information provided. But if you're already an expert, there will be the part that I will focus more, and I hopefully deliver more detailed for your satisfaction. So, and the inspiration behind the presentation is this one, that as I am currently living in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, I happened to visit some of the libraries and archives. And during one visit, I came across this interesting corpus of documents that's usually coming as a kind of yearbooks or monographs compiled by local Hakka associations. These come mostly from the representing particular region. For example, this book on the red is about the Hakkas living in Penang. Then you have a newer compilation from 2023, I believe. And what is interesting is this linkage of the Taipings to the Hakkas, that you see, if you read in Chinese, you can see the title of one Japanese scholar, the Taiping Tianguo Yukejia, so the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom and the Hakka. And you see that the Taipings also appear as a kind of background explaining origins of Hakka in Malaysia and overseas. That if you look at the photo here, you see a couple of waves coming from the North China to South China and overseas. Please pay attention to this part because it's gonna be a recurring theme. Last but not least, this linkage between to the Hakka is not limited to the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Even the more popular materials on YouTube, you will find YouTubers who will discuss the Basel mission in China, and they will, for example, as this YouTuber provided a series on the Basel Chaihui in Guangdong. And what struck me back then was this emphasis of that the Basel missionaries loved the Hakka and basically were very devoted to the Hakka culture, Hakka preserving Hakka identity. And precisely this part came a little bit in, I wouldn't say conflict, but kind of differed from my experience when studied the sources of Basel mission and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. that although the wording concerning Hakka did appear, but it did not appear perhaps in such an extent that we would believe that it would appear. And how is the case? I'm going to explain that in further. But before that, please allow me to have a couple of words regarding the Basel mission and then the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, especially for you, for those that you're new to the subject. So the Basel mission, or in German, Evangelische Missionsgesellschaft in Basel, or Basler Mission, in English, Evangelical Missionary Society in Basel, was founded in 1815 as an interdenominational, meaning that it unified denomination within Protestant tradition of Christianity, and for example, Lutheran, Calvinist mostly, and that also had a strong pietist influence. Now, pietism was a movement within the Protestant Christianity that emerged in 17th century German states through intellectuals and thinkers such as Philipp Jakob Spener. Pietists saw the need of the revival within the Christian community, referring here to Protestant one, that would go away from, let's say, sticking to liturgy or nominal adherence to a particular church in favor of the active faith, that a person through the Bible study, through the personal reflection, could receive something called Wiedergeburt, or born again experience, and that through the Bible studies could attain something called Frömmigkeit, the piety. So the Bible would become not just a part of, let's say, nominal designation of who you are, like I'm Lutheran, I'm Calvinist, but it becomes like an active way of a Christian way of life. I don't say that the other denominations do not have these elements, but the pietists specifically emphasize this as their main goal. Now, with this background will be important for us to understand how the Basel mission eventually understood the Taipings. And before they set foot in China, they had successes in establishing missions in other parts of the regions, for example, Gold Coast in Ghana, in Africa in 1828, in India in 1834, and in China in 1847. Hereby I refer specifically the year of arrival to particular region. This wouldn't be, of course, possible without cooperation with other missionary societies and other actors involved, from regular believers supporting by donations to very big players, if I can use this word. So please bear in mind these bullet points many times glosses over many complexities here. But what's important for our story is that Basel mission had very, let's say, profound support from the society that was formed specifically for preaching in China, that is the Chinese Union. Now, the Chinese Union, or Chinesischer Verein in German, or Hanhui in Chinese, was a society that came into being after the Nanjing Treaty that concluded the First Opium War. Now, the First Opium War was fought between the British Empire and the Qing Dynasty, and it stipulated that the British Empire won the war, and in Nanjing Treaty it was stipulated that the Qing Empire would concede to the British opening some ports that will be named treaty ports, and within these treaty ports, incoming of foreigners, including Western missionaries, would be allowed. And by the time one individual who happened also to serve as an interpreter to the British government Karl Gustav saw this an opportunity. He claimed that the doors of China were finally open for the evangelization. Now, of course, there were attempts before the Protestant missionaries, very prominently by Catholic Jesuit missionaries, but earlier attempts were quelled by the Qing court, which eventually banned any missionary activities in 18th century during the reign of the Kangxi and the Yongzheng emperors. Now we had pulled in brackets comeback with the new wave of the Protestant endeavors and other Christian missions coming to China. And Karl Gustav saw this opportunity to find a new missionary society called the Chinese Union that was also having the earlier mentioned pietist influences. Gustav believed that the missionary effort should be based on the natives, and the Western missionaries involved should be primarily about overseeing already existing Christian converts. So in this model, he organized his Chinese Union and spread the news to other missionary associations throughout Europe, who were initially enthusiastic about the progress that was made by Karl Gustav and his Chinese Union, to the point that when Karl Gustav approached one Basel missionary, Kuchenberg, I remember was his surname, as well as later through extended correspondence with the committee of the Basel mission, referring to the main governing body of the Basel mission. The committee was eventually convinced to join the missionary endeavors in China. So the committee decided to choose two missionaries, here Theodor Hamburg, a Swede, and Rudolf Lechler from Baden-Württemberg, a German, to go to China, and then they arrived in Hong Kong in 1847. So, as I mentioned, the part about Western missionaries being overseers to the Chinese converts, but how they were organized. Well, Gustav's idea was that there will be overseers of specific language, dialects, or groups. How it was done? Here, I would like to make a short pause before we continue, because at the same time, we need to understand the other element of the background, that is the upcoming Taiping rebellion, Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. And in order to understand this part, we have to bear in mind that what was important here was the shift from the Han majority Chinese Ming dynasty and to the minority Manchu people-led Qing dynasty. That would be one of the important parts for the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Although at the time of the outbreak of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, the Qing dynasty ruled for over 200 years, but when the new challenges faced them, they were not sufficiently prepared. Just to mention a few factors like insufficient army modernization when they encountered the modernized British army, the Qing army couldn't respond properly during the First Opium War. There were socioeconomic factors. In the beginning compared to the beginning of the rule of Qing dynasty towards the beginning of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, China saw the rise of its population from what I remember, 170 million people around to 420 million people over that number. So he had at least twofold, if not threefold burst of population. And that was combined with what plagued many dynasties of China, that is this concentration of wealth among the very small group of landowners on the expenses of vast numbers of Chinese peasants. How that happened? Witold Rodziński, one of the Polish-American scholars, described this, that originally the new emperor would set up the dynasty and share the land among peasants and other people, as the war usually caused the loss of the population, right? But as the time went, the landowners would be becoming increasingly wealthy to the point that they could buy up the remaining land, and those who sold their land, the small farmers, they will become tenants to these landowners. And that it created a vicious cycle that the landowners will keep pushing the pressure to these farming tenants by adding new taxes, new obligations. So at the end of the day, the peasants will become desperate, and they will be more prone to rebel, to join revolts, and this would be combined with other problems for the empire, that the British introduced opium. Opium that was a way to bypass the fiscal system that was imposed on Western powers by the Qing dynasty, that namely before the Opium Wars, the trade in Canton or Guangzhou had to be done in silver. The payments had to be done in silver. Now, the British, with the new way of bypassing it, they could basically, instead of paying with silver, they could use opium, and that destabilized Qing financial system, as many of the fiscal policies were based on silver, liang in Mandarin Chinese. And last but not least, let us not forget that we've already discussed incoming Western missionaries. So it means that on top of older ideas of peasant rebellions that were many times justified by using traditional Chinese folk religions, Buddhism, Taoism, etc., there will be a new strain of rebellion that will be having its justification not in older tradition, but upcoming Christian religion. And this new rebellion story would be exemplified in the story of Hong Xiuquan, the leader of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Now, like many people throughout the era, Hong Xiuquan was as many others, competing to become an official in the vast bureaucracy. And one of the primary method of doing that was to pass the imperial examinations, Keju. Although Hong had support from his family to pursue this career as an official, he couldn't pass the first major stage that would require him a title of Bachelor of Shoucai, and he failed that 4 times. So when he was around the second time in Guangzhou, when these examinations were held, he encountered what some historians believe was a foreign missionary. Some believe he was just a Chinese convert, distributing Christian tracts and preaching to other Chinese people. Now, initially, Hong didn't pay too much attention. He just grabbed a leaflet that was given to him and continued studying for the next go. By the time he failed the examinations, he experienced a mental breakdown during which he had visions. And during these visions, they were extraordinary. He claimed to saw older man on the throne that told Hong Xiuquan that he's believing him anymore. Nobody's worshiping me anymore. But I will give you this assignment: take this sword and defeat all the demons that they're plaguing the earth. Now, Hong Xiuquan, the vision was like very, very complex. I was just providing the gist of it. He woke up and couldn't understand the meaning behind this. And some of his relatives mentioned to him that actually there's this one book that you took from Guangzhou Canton, and there might be some explanation behind what you just saw. And after its extensive study of Quan Shi Liang and Good Words to Admonish the Age, as well as the Bible later, Hong Xiuquan came to the conclusion what he saw in the vision was God the Father himself, or as he referred to him as Tian Fu, or Heavenly Father. He also saw Tian Xiong, or Elder Brother. That was the title that he referred to Jesus Christ, and other people as well from the let's say from the biblical landscape. And that he came to this conclusion that what he saw was the vision that he should defeat the demons. Well, who were the demons? Initially, he had this idea that they were any idols that were not worship of the God the Father or Heavenly Father. But so it would mean Chinese folk religion deities, for example. But as his movement of God worshipper society that was set up in 1843 got increasingly politicized, involved in the backlash from the local elites and local authorities, the movement became increasingly political. Hong Xiuquan asked himself in the poems that he wrote and he published, if the God, the Father, the Heavenly Father gave the land to each nation, why the Manchu people are ruling over us, Hua people or Chinese people or Han people, if you prefer. So the conclusion was that the Qing dynasty, that is Manchu, violated the law of the Heavenly Father, and we have to do something about it. And do something about it, launch an uprising against the ruling Qing dynasty. So by the 1815, the assembled God worshippers got together at the Jintian to launch an uprising. And 1 year later, Hong Xiuquan proclaimed the kingdom of the heavenly peace, Taiping Tianguo, or the Taiping heavenly kingdom, thus the name, the Taiping. Hong Xiuquan himself proclaimed himself as the heavenly king Tianwang, and other leaders were referred as Wangs or kings or princes. Remember that the translation is not always one-to-one, as the semantic field of these two names are the kind of differs. Now, for this map, if you see to the south, near to the sea, you have Guangzhou, and together with Hong Kong. The Taipings originally, Hong Xiuquan was born in Huaxin, very close to Guangzhou. And then you have also places like Jiaying, which will be also important later, northeast to what we see here from Guangzhou. Hong Xiuqian and his followers went eventually to Guangxi province, and you can see that from Jintian, like where those red hours begin, they started an armed insurrection that slowly went northeast, eventually to reach what we know today as Nanjing. Back then was referred as Jinling, and what Hong Xiuqian and others called, renamed to Tianjin, the heavenly capital. And the period of 1853-1854 saw I would say, the biggest threat to the ruling Qing dynasty. The Taipings became so dangerous to the ruling Qing dynasty that they almost reached Beijing. They were stopped around the Tianjin and some areas slightly to the south from Beijing, so where the imperial court of Qing dynasty resided. They controlled the vast areas of the Yangtze Delta and Yangtze River. They also expanded to other provinces. There was a moment of crisis for the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom due to the Tianjin incident, as the kings or wangs, as I mentioned, were involved in the power struggle. But Taipings managed to survive partially because the Qing dynasty also was occupied with other rebellions that were simultaneously occurring during that time. The Triad rebellions in the south, the Muslim rebellions in the north Shanxi region, the Pantai rebellion in the Yunnan province, and more and more and more. Lastly, the second Opium War also occurred between 1856 and 1860. Now, the Taipings had their second revival in the period between 1859 to 1862 by the arrival of Hong Zhengan, who was cousin to Hong Xiuqian. As he was trained by the Western missionaries, he also had opportunities to explore more the Western world in Hong Kong. Hong Zhengan, inspired what he saw and what he learned, he proposed a series of reforms during that period. Unfortunately for the Taipings, both because the Western powers initially sided with the Qing dynasty, and also because the Qing managed to modernize their military, eventually between 1862 and 1864, the Qing forces eventually concentrated their efforts on the Jiangsu province and managed to capture the heavenly capital in Tianjin or Nanjing. And although the remains of the Taiping forces continued fighting until 1872, I remember, the main bulk of the rebellion was already quelled. The Taipings proved to have a huge influence over the mostly southern and eastern regions of China. According to estimates, like the most conservative I heard of would be 10 million, but most cited number would be 20 million of the death toll. But if you combine it with other rebellions and diseases, then the famine that struck China, the number could get much higher. Now, so that would be for the background, and circling back to the main topic that I would like to discuss. So, how Basel missionaries approached the Hakkas and eventually the Taipings. Now, after arrival, very soon after, Theodor Hamburg and Rudolf Lechler, I would say, they showed to the committee their initial enthusiasm. They would write down that Gutzlav is a very talented missionary. He speaks many dialects of Chinese, and his assistants also are able to do that. And throughout the description provided by Hamburg, he mentions the Hakka dialect, written as such in German. And also, he also states the Hakka Hua, or like Hua referring to the character for speech, for dialect, for mostly vernacular tone. So even up to date, if you speak Chinese, you will be referring to the Kejiahua Hakka language, Hakka speech, or Guangdonghua, the Cantonese, and so on and so on. And he listed other dialects that he mentioned: Mandarin, Putin, Hoklo, and Hokkien. And he slowly started to draw where this speech, this dialect was spoken. So he mentioned Huizhou, Jiaying, and also he first stated the dichotomy between the Puntis and the Hakkas. Now, who are the Puntis? We will get to that in a second. But Hamburg went on describing that he noticed that to him, Hakka Hua was similar to the predominant Mandarin dialect or Mandarin speech, that the speech that the officials used in their communication. And that he started to define where this Hakka language was spoken. And he also said in admiration that Gutzlav is probably the only or one of the two people, Westerners, that could speak this language. And initially, Hamburg wanted to decide which dialect to choose, so Gutzlav made decision to him that said that Hamburg will be learning Hakka and Lechler will be learning Hoklo. Now, so lastly, Hamburg also made a hint to us that even by that time, he also already started thinking of the basic glossary for the Hakka terms. That will be based on the popular dictionary that was compiled by the very first Protestant missionary into China, Robert Morrison. But as the time years, then the enthusiasm as well changed. Rudolf Lechler started to report to the Basel mission about the difficulties that Hamburg faced. And two missionaries slowly realized that the task was way larger than they imagined, that the Hakka land, as it like here is written, or land of the Hakkas, was way larger than they imagined, that apart from the part of the Guangdong region, it also included the areas of the nearby Jiangxi province. And this discord between what was expected from them and what was like imagined objectives and the reality caused the discord between on one side, Theodor Hamburg, Rudolf Lechler, and Karl Gutzlav. The two groups argued over what's appropriate missionary strategy. What is more, there were increasing accusations towards the Chinese Union from Christian converts, from other missionaries, that the initial claims of the progress were heavily exaggerated. To address this, missionaries and Theodor Hamburg was also, Rudolf Lechler was also involved in it, compiled a report regarding the state of the Chinese Union, but which was firstly sent as a document in 1850 to the committee, and later it was published for bigger audience in 1851. That basically listed all the inconsistencies that were appearing in claims coming from Gutzlav and Chinese Union overall. This eventually led to the increasing decoupling between the Basel Mission and the Chinese Union. Also in 1851, after Gutzlaff went to Europe and got back to China, he eventually died in Hong Kong in 1851, further cementing that the Basel Mission could drive away from the efforts of the Chinese Union. But before we go to the next section, I would just briefly include that the Hakka identity was also mentioned by the people working within the Chinese Union that were not part of the Basel Mission. So this is extract from the diaries of the Castle Missionary Society missionary Karl Vogel, who was associate of Karl Gutzlaff, and this is entry from 1850 October. And as you can see, what's interesting, he's like more or less consistent with sharings of Hamburg and Rechler, saying about Hakka dialect, Hakka men, Hakka brethren, Punti also appearing, though with spelling that's mostly based on English phonetics, so P-O-N-T-E and so on. And interestingly, Hakka is spelled with the C instead of double K, so it's like Hakka CK instead of K. But more overall, it was like consistent observation, treating the Hakka as a dialect group. Moving on to the, as you noticed by now, the Taipings already are a thing. So, and moreover, news about the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom are reaching Basel missionaries. By 12 February 1852, Rudolf Lechler firstly stated what scholars believe to be the first mention of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, that the rebellion in the Guangxi province has not yet been quelled by the Qing authorities. 2 months later, associate and relative to Hong Xiuqian, Hong Zhengan, who did not manage to join the bulk of the Taiping army and proceed to Nanjing. He stayed in Guangdong province, tried to organize with other people a pro-Taiping uprising in Haiguling in Guangdong. After this uprising failed, Hong Zhengan managed to get in contact with the converts, Christian converts, that eventually one of them called Hong Xian or Fung Sen took him to Theodor Hamburg in Hong Kong. What is important to more linguistic analysis here is that back then, Hong Zhengan handed over to Theodor Hamburg this document, Hong Xiuqian's background, Hong Xiuqian Lai Li. He wasn't able to sustain himself, so after a month, he went back to the Chinese interior. But after 1 year later, Hong Zhengan got back and reconnected with Hamburg. He got baptized, and together with Hanger, as well as other converts of the Basel Mission, he went to Hong Kong. And based on Hong Xiuqian Lai Li, Hong Xiuqian background, as well as oral statements of Hong Zhengan, as well as probably also other elements, Theodor Hamburg wrote a report to the Basel Mission Committee, and this report eventually was converted, was transformed by Theodor Hamburg as a standalone book called The Visions of the Hong Xiuqian and the Origins of the Guangxi Insurrection. So here you see the Hong Xiuqian's background, the main basis, the original. Then you see the Hamburg's report, and you see the book, English book. What's interesting for us here is obviously the Hakka aspect here. So if you look at the Chinese Hong Xiuqian Lai Li, what you see is that this phrase, 后有十分途人来人向下. So referring to that, at the time of the God worshippers society, there were already disputes that eventually evolved into open armed conflict between the native people called the Puntis, as we mentioned them before, and the newcomers, literally people who came here, 来人. This is like the version of Hongzhengan, so the Chinese edition. And then we can look how it was written into English. So Hamburg here way more expanded. He provided way more details onto the situation. And further, he started to link this concept that aborigines of Guangxi are the Tuzhen, the Punti, and then you had the newcomers, the Hakka or Kikya or Kejia. Kikya probably being more older spelling of Kejia in Mandarin pronunciation. So you see already that Hamburg, put in brackets, upgraded these two terms, Tuzhen, Laizhen, native people, newcomers, into Punti and Hakka. So that was this first important element that he and the other, like, who participated in compiling this book added. Now, the second thing was that not only he used more like consistently the word Hakka, but also he started to link Hongshouqian's background and other people of Hongshouqian to Hakka identity, stating that the Hongshouqian's ancestor having moved from Jiaingzhou, from the northeast of Guangdong province. And this part was moreover, the part of Hongshouqian apparently was important to Hamburg, that eventually during the process of compiling the dictionary, he and Lechler included this entry that stated that, if you see to the picture to the right, Hongshouqian, name of the present insurgent. And now if you look at the background picture, this is the manuscript of the English dictionary. And now, as you see here, this is the manuscript in German. And you see here Hongshouqian Name der Insurgenten Kaisers. So literally the name of the emperor of the insurgents. But what's interesting is that what Hamburg wrote wasn't just, the matter of his personal interest. It was actually a way to support Hongzhengan financially to reach Nanjing. So the idea was that Hamburg would support Hongzhengan into joining the main bulk of the Taipings in Nanjing, and maybe this could help establish the relations between further relations between missionaries and the Taipings. Although the Hongzhengan and another convert called Li Zhenggao happened to reach Shanghai, soon they were not able to pass through the Qing authorities' barricades, and also through the barricades made by the local small sword uprising by the local secret societies of Shanghai. And as they were staying there, they had more and more problems. They faced the news of their protector's death, Theodor Hamburg, in 13th May 1854. They had increasing problems with their host, Walter Henry Medhurst, due to accusations of using opium by one of the converts. And lastly, the two had no choice but to return to Hong Kong. And by 1855, Hongzhengan de facto, practically abandoned Basel mission and formally joined the London Missionary Society, whereas Li Zhengao, who would be important later, remained a Basel missionary preacher. Now, we can skip a little bit some parts. As you notice, from 1856 to 1860, there was the ongoing Second Opium War that destabilized situation within Hong Kong. What is important here that Hong Zhengan saw this opportunity to reconnect with the Taipings in Nanjing. And this time, he did not choose the maritime road, but he decided to go through the more continental road. And he succeeded to arrive in Nanjing in 1859. Soon after, he was made de facto, what we could say, a prime minister of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom by Hong Xiuqian himself, was conferred the title of Shield King or Ganwang. And he started his modernization programs, I was earlier mentioned, include by writing pieces of writings, including the new treatise to aid the administration, Zizheng Xinpian. Meanwhile, what's interesting for the Basel side, one part of the Basel mission, mostly represented by the editor of the Evangelisches Missions magazine, Albert Ostertag, mostly focused on the Taipings as the political and religious movement, so politische religiöse Bewegung. But at the same time, the other part of the Basel mission, mostly the reports were going to the Evangelische Heidenbote, another journal of Basel mission, was mostly focusing on the Hakka community that Basel missionaries slowly felt more and more sense of sympathy and even connection to. So they were referring to the Hakkas as our Hakka Christians, unsere Hakka Christen. And what is interesting here that unlike Hamburg, like when he's made this like very close connection, these two discourses were almost separate. Ostertag barely mentioned the Hakka identity, whereas Mari Stotz, Lechla, Philip Vinnes, regarding the Hakka community, they basically did not mention Taipings in that context at all. Unlike earlier mentioned Hong Zhengan, who in the new treatise to the aid of administration, so the part of modernization programs, he listed countries that he considered that the China should or should not consider for the potential modernization program. And he stated Sweden as a more progressive, reformist country, advanced. And what is interesting here that Hong Zhengan recalled Theodor Hamburg here in person, and he said that that his congregations was mostly consistent of Hakka, qi tu jie ke jia. So you see the instance of the Taipings using the term Kejia, guest family, very, very clearly here. And that was, I also came across more sources that will mention this Hakka term more explicitly. In another document, Gospel jointly witnessed by heard by the royal elders and second eldest brothers, referring to all two brothers of Hong Xiuqian, Hong Zhenfa and Hong Zhenda, that they will quote the words of the true sovereign Ming Hong Xiuqian that 客家本地宗相通，君王万岁谁人见? Where Hong Xiuqian implied that his reign will be for everybody, no matter whether they are Hakka or not. And that is like interesting, although that he used the dichotomy of Hakka and the Punti people, but he specifically used this time Kejia instead of Laizhen that appeared earlier in usage by Hong Zhengan. And what I would like to stress here is that these terms addressing the Hakka identity did occur even outside the Basel mission. For example, when the rebellion was going to the end, and when the leaders of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom got captured by Qing authorities. What you see here is a extract from the deposition of Shi Dakai, the Wing King of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. And when he was recalling the reasons behind why he joined the Taipings, he mentioned the persecution by local people, Tuzhen, from Guangxi province towards the guest people, literal translation here, Ke-Ren. And what is interesting here is that Tuzhen, the local people, is used also to refer to the Guangxi people of the Guangxi people, meaning that, which is why I also refrained from directly translating Tuzhen into Cantonese people, because as you see here, Tuzhen is not necessarily applied only to the people from the Guangdong province. Likewise, the earlier term Laizhen was not necessarily meaning the people of the Hakka ascent. They were mostly saying like the people coming to that province. And circling back to Hong Zhengan when he was captured, interesting enough, when he was stating his deposition, he reverted back to the terms that he originally used. So you see locals, Tuzhen, and newcomers, Laizhen. Why? I think it was due to the fact that he was writing it as a kind of memoir of how the Taiping Rebellion occurred, and he was in this regard more consistent with Hong Xiuqian's background, which also documented the history of rebellion, rather than being a kind of statement to the outside audience. That, for example, the new aid to new treatise to the aid administration was supposed to do. And now, after the 1864. After such a huge event, the Basel mission was left with the legacy of the Taipings and perhaps also this question, well, actually, who are the people we are preaching to? The Hakka. And throughout the aftermath, what you see, the late stage and the aftermath, what you see is the increasing reflection, Basel mission increasingly reflecting on who the Hakka were or are. And the articles from Basel missionaries or people related to Basel mission, such as Johannes Eitel, appearing. And they were not appearing out of vacuum for a couple of reasons, just to list one. One, they were also based on another generation of people upcoming. So listed here, memory about the Taipings by their descendants, Hong Kui-shou, who was son of Hong Zhengan, and Li Zhenggao, the first native pastor that was mentioned earlier, who was close associated to Hong Zhengan before. Now, what's important here is that the Hakka Chinese article directly, or so I should say indirectly, references that Lechler says that two of his converts, one surnamed Hong, another surnamed Li, their genealogy could be traced even to the north of China, and then they went to Jiangzhou, and then went to Huaxian, and then they came here to Basel Mission. So what is important here is the first instance that I recorded that the origins of Hakka was traced even further back, not just to migration to the about 17th, 18th century to Jiangzhou, but way, way, way before, to the Han Dynasty, reigning between 3rd century BCE to 3rd century AD, or Common Era, depending on how do you define. And the other main other reason was that perhaps Professor Follman could agree that this period also saw increasing standardization of Hakka language. The standard what Basel mission operated shifted from the Xinan district in modern Shenzhen to Jiangzhou or Meizhou, to what is known today. This is also the time when already for example, major publications in Hakka were already published. Gospels in Hakka, learning materials for Hakka language, and as I listed here, the one of the Hakka Chinese dictionary that was based on actually what Theodor Hamburg, Rudolf Lechler, and later Charles Piton did. McIver and Mackenzie, they were basing these, there were two Presbyterian missionaries that they expanded what was done by the Basel mission. And another part of the late stage aftermath, slowly like closing, that as the time passed, the discourse was increasingly professionalized. Later Basel missionary Wilhelm Oeller published two books, Die Taiping Bewegung in 1923. That was part of his, I believe, master thesis. And then Aufstand in China in 1858 was already published after the Basel mission had to quit from mainland China. And what was interesting to see from these two books is that the stress on the Hakka identity is clearer on the latter one, number one. Number two, Eller was already mentioning the increasing role of the local church in Hong Kong that at that time was already appearing at the name of the Chongzhenkui or Chongqing mission, and to extend it to other churches. That was also the time that another originally a part of Basel mission, but it became its own church on its own rights, Basel Christian Church of Malaysia, already existed as a separate entity. So the Basel missionaries already lost their monopoly, I would say, and the local discourse was like becoming increasingly more and more vocal. Last but not least, you had historians who were trained in the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, and they were rediscovering the sources of the Basel mission. Jian Wen, Carty Smith, Jesse Lutz, Patrick Dreyer, Xia Chuntao, Akika, and many, many others that there will be worthy to mention, Torov Clyde, Carty Steiber, and so on and so on. And in last but not least, if you remember the initial photo I showed you about the waves of migration of Hakka, think like you could connect it with what Hamburg provided about the background of Hong Xiuquan, that he was coming from Jiangzhou, and then later what Lechler and others expanded upon, like hearing the stories from Li Zhengao and Hong Kuei-Xiu. And now you had a synthesis on the academic level by Luo Xianglin. And the photos of arrows that you see, actually, that's the northern origin of Hakka theory promulgated by Luo Xianglin himself. So you could see these things were further expanded upon. And now what's interesting also is that the process is not yet over. Now, for example, they have more and more people critically examining this theory of the northern origin of Hakka. We can discuss it later, but now for just to provide the conclusion, what you see, in my opinion, is the emerging Hakka identity, first being a designation of people speaking the same dialect, vernacular speech, then and being contrasted to the locals, then the Taipings appear, and what they do is they also provide this nexus of the background for the Hakka. And in turn, what's interesting is that the Taipings themselves increasingly they're becoming going at the process of Hakkaization. If you look at the earlier descriptions of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, coming from Ostertag or early Lechler, they were mostly about the Christian religion or whether or not the Taipings were Christian enough. But what later came was increasingly treating the Taipings as Hakka as such. And then later, of course, you had nativization of discourses by local churches. And finally, we have the proud Hakkas that they emerge. Now, this is perhaps the basis for a new article that could put more emphasis on other sources. After all, the Hakka identity wasn't just formed by the Basel mission or just by the Taiping rebellion, right? And last but not least, as you see, some questions already that are going beyond the limitations of the history method, that they were slowly going into field of linguistics and sociology or anthropology, so we can see some rooms of improvement in terms of methodology and theory. But that will be the concern for another time. I hope that I didn't take too much time, and I would like to thank everyone to listening for me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcin, for this very insightful, detailed we have now time for discussion. If you want to comment, please maybe raise your hand and then we can organize it. Jeremy Hakka. Yes.
Hi, Marcin. Sorry. Very scary light. Good to see you again. I was struck by quite a lot of the things you said, and to be fair, this is a sort of a longer form of things we've discussed before.
Right.
But the question I have at the moment has to do, in large part, I think, with how the Basel narrative then filtered through into this basic Republican-era scholarship, particularly Jian Yuan. Why were later scholars so receptive to the Basel kind of shift in emphasis towards an ethnic basis for revolt, when in many ways it doesn't intuitively come from the sources directly, unless you're specifically reading a Basel narrative into them to begin with.
Right, good part. Although Jian Yuan realized that there were Basel traits of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, he was one of the first historians from mainland China, if not elsewhere, to pay attention that, well, Theodor Hamberg was from Basel Mission, and he translated Theodor Hamberg's work into Chinese. But initially, I would say, if you remember also that was the time when Jian Yuan was writing in 1930s and slowly going to the 1950s. That was the time of summarizing the historiography of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom by Deng Siyu, for example, in the United States. And now what's interesting is that, in my opinion, Deng Siyu had a little bit, let's say, made a bit confusion in the sense that although he listed Theodor Hamberg and his work, he also wrote a passage about German sources in his book, The Historiography of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. And here he said that, well, the sources are not that abundant, And mostly they're just retelling of what others told. For example, he listed Eller, and Wilhelm Eller, which is true, what he cited was Albert Ostertag, Evangelisches Missionsmagazin, not directly citing the sources from the Basel Mission archives. So it created, I think, rather confusion that apart from what Ostertag did, there was nothing too much else. And only what coming later, as you're from Hong Kong, another very important scholar came, Carl Thurman Smith. Smith was the person who visited the Basel archives in 1980s. He met with, I see that Miss Andrea Rehn is also here, hello. And he visited one of the members of the Basel Mission archives, Richard Deutsch, who helped to translate some of the reports by the Basel Mission, and that appeared as a standalone publications of Carl Smith. And in 1980s, eventually coming into book Hakka Christian's Middleman, republished in 2005, I remember. Now, other scholars started to notice this trait. For example, Akiko Kurata in 2014, when she started to go into relations between Hong Zhengan and the Basel Mission. And she was already building up on the earlier reflections made by Xia Chuntao, who also revisited the Basel Mission could have more sources, but he was unable to visit them. Akiko Kurata made another diagram, but I know that you're more focused on the Republican side, Jeremy. So circling back, sorry for this, a bit going too much into the future. Circling back then, if you read what Jianyo Wen and others, Jianyo Wen perhaps was aware that there can be more to the Basel Mission, but due to financial constraints and his perception, he was by and large the historian of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom as a Christian movement. That was he was very emphasized in his Taiping Tianguo Tongkao and other works. He did not eventually had chance to visit Basel Mission sources. So the Basel Mission sources had to be rediscovered only in 1970s, 1980s. And I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Just as a very small comment, and I'll let someone else ask a question. I do wonder if Dung had actually read Erler, or whether he was getting a summary of Erler from William James Hale, whose 1927 book on Zheng Guofan has quite an extensive bibliography with commentary. And what you said about Dung's discussion of Erler sounds very much like how Hale described Erler in the 20s.
As far as I remember from the narration of the narrative and historiography of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom by Deng Siyu, he did state that he consulted catalog of books from different libraries without going too much into details how much he actually read these books. This part is not clear to me, but he did stated earlier works such as Christian Spielmann, and he provides summary to every disposition. However, your hypothesis here might be right that he did not delve further into it, but he did not read it thoroughly.
Yeah. Well, I've got my copy at home somewhere. I'm sure I can cross-reference, but thank you very much, and I'll let someone else ask some questions now.
You're welcome. Go. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, discussion points? So can we conclude from your historical description that the term Hakka came up actually in the conflict between Bunti and Hakka, and then was extended by language to the northern parts. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would by and large agree that what is emerging very early on is this dichotomy between those who are here and those who are outside that they came, right? And this partially also, I would say, explains the discord between the Chinese sources back then, which tend to be more conservative on using that term. For example, I mentioned Li Zhengao. I mentioned that, I only found like 4 instances in the Taiping sources, and contrast that with the Western discourse everywhere, like many, many places you can find the term Hakka.
Yes. So, okay, I don't want to take time away from other commenters if there are any. Jeremy. Jeremy wants to speak. Please.
Sorry, that was initially an applause reaction, but I mean, I think if there is one other thing, it does seem to be that we're seeing the Taiping as much more entangled with these global movements from the outset, but in complicated ways. And I think what struck me was when you looked at actually, do the Taiping actually use the word Hakka and when do they do it? That seems to be actually very conscious Basel influence coming in from Hong Rengan, who is reframing ideas he'd had earlier in that lens. And I'm intrigued to see where else this goes, especially in kind of the long-term view.
Yes. The only instance that it's unquestionably what I found right for the moment, a Taiping source that comes outside the Basel mission would be number 1, Shidakai, had no connections to the Taipings whatsoever, and he used the term Kejun. And the other was coming from Hong Shouqian himself, but we can't dispute here how much the 1860s, the gospel witnessed by the 2 eldest brothers were also influenced by Hong Zhengan, as we might remember that Hong Zhengan was already in Nanjing, right? So, and yes, and it is very, very plausible that Hong Zhengan was like reframing the original term Laizhen to become the Kedia, because also like he was referring to Hamburg, like his mentor back then, who had also a very, very fond view like of it. Like if you notice the original Chinese, very much more favorable that he had to other missionary societies, had much more complex relation with the London Missionary Society, for example, right? So yeah, I agree.
Okay, Professor Lau, you wanted to comment?
I think the term Hakka appeared much earlier, and this is a term given by the Western people around, say, 1800. And it was not popular among the Hakka-speaking people then. And then before it was well accepted by Hakka people, it wasn't, recognized by Hakka-speaking people. I mean, the Basel mission has contributed a lot to use this term, including the compilation of the dictionary as early as the 1850 or so by Humbert. But before that, we didn't have any, something like Hakka dialect among us. we only identify ourselves as the place where we were born. For example, Meixian or Huizhou dialect, not Hakka dialect. Hakka dialect as a whole was recognized much later by Hakka speakers. Now everyone say that we speak Hakka, but this wasn't a normal phenomena, say around 200 years ago. But now it's very important that the promotion of the term Hakka was after the Taiping Revolution rather than the Taiping Revolution, because there was a conflict, some kind of polemics in Guangzhou around 120 years ago. And this was described by Luo Xianglin in his book, 客家研究导论, or Introduction to Hakka Origin, Introduction to Hakka Studies. Yeah. And then he described quite, quite in details about the conflicts of the Punti people and Hakka people. And it began much earlier, and the people around Huizhou were a bit, puzzled by the term Hakka, and then asked the scholar about the origin of Hakka, and the scholar explained it in terms of northern origin. So we were not native people to Guangdong here, and it was around 1800 or so. So, but it was not a self-nomination. It was not a self-naming, It was some kind of native people's naming, because in Cantonese, Jia means group of people. We have Danjia, we have Kejia, we have many Jia, and even in Hong Kong now, for people who buy properties and sell them for speculation, we say then 炒家. So this wasn't a good term. It has some kind of negative meaning for Jia instead. So we didn't accept this name until the publication of Luo Xianglin's book in 1933. And Taiwan did not knew that they were Hakka until the end of the Japanese colonization. So the name was spread slowly throughout southern China, and in Sichuan, even in the 1980s, the people speaking Hakka-like dialects there did not recognize themselves as Hakka, but say that they are Guangdong人, Guangdonghua. And the people laugh at them. You are speaking not Guangdonghua. Guangdonghua is somehow different from yours, etc. So I have written some papers on that around about the self-naming or others naming of the term Hakka. Now Hakka is generally accepted by Hakka speakers, but not everyone. Even in Guangdong, in the western part of Guangdong, there are a group of people called Ngaiwa people. Actually, they are now speaking some branches of Hakka, which I can communicate at once with them, just like New Zealand English and English. Okay, but they say that they are not Hakka. Why? Because they were intimidated, and they were a bit bullied by the local people there, and they won't say that they are Hakka. We are only the Ngai people. And also in Vietnam, they are also a minority called Ngai people. Actually, we will laugh at them because they are speaking the same dialects as ours. So it's not a kind of comment. Also, it's only for my additional information to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may respond to Professor's insights.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Ma. That what you said now, I would say, is also consistent with other sources that I examined, even these that were brought up today. If you notice the depositions that the Taiping kings were leaving to the Qing authorities after they had been caught, how did they start the deposition? I am a native of Guangdong Huaxian province. I am the native of Guangxi province. So this is their, like in Chinese, 出发点, the starting point. Not I'm Hakka, right?
Yeah.
And that was also, I remember there was this remark that University Malaya scholar, Professor Danny Wong, also made me realize that even in 1970s and 1980s, as the associations were slowly becoming interconnected in Malaysia, they use a very interesting term in Chinese. It's called 客属. It's like belonging to Hakka. It's not that direct as Kejia as such. So only later the Keshu went out of favor in favor of Kejia, so after 1980s. And last but not least, the book of the Penang Association of Hakka, of belonging to Hakka Keshu, also, surprise, surprise, including the paper of Lo Xianglin about the Hakka genealogy. So we have, and the final, would say, source that I did not have time to, unfortunately, add to this presentation was the report. I might be wrong, but either from North China Herald or Overland Mail of China, so either the Shanghai newspaper or Hong Kong newspaper at the time, and it was an extract from the British intelligence stating that apparently these people are they use the term semi-barbaric origin, and they're called the Hakka, or the like non-aborigines. So partially address what you just said, Professor, that the Hakka also, I suppose, was used in a very pejorative manner. Like, I am the local, you're the guest. Like in this kind of overtone. And that's like this consequence of usage of that term that can be even seen today, as you also provided. I thank you for like so much to learn here.
Are there any more comments? Otherwise, we are almost at the end where we have to leave the room soon. So maybe we can stop at this point. Once again, thank you very much for the speaker and for the attending listeners for coming. I hope we can meet again soon on this topic. Goodbye, everybody.